I really enjoyed making the best scene in Thor Love and Thunder video, not because I love Thor Love and Thunder, but because I think it's interesting when a bad movie gets something right. I think that's more interesting to analyse than tearing down a bad scene in an otherwise good movie. A good scene in a bad movie is always more mysterious because you sit back and ask yourself, how did this moment end up so right when everything else was so wrong? Who had their latte in the morning that day? Who was firing on all cylinders? How did this happen? X-Men Dark Phoenix is without doubt the worst X-Men movie, aside from counting the spin-off New Mutants, which is barely part of the canon. Of the mainline X-Men movies, their sequel, prequels, and the Wolverine films, I sincerely think X-Men Dark Phoenix ranks as the worst. Even Apocalypse has some redeeming moments.
Is this what you want from me? Is this what I am?
And Origins Wolverine is far more watchable for its sheer stupidity.
Hey, Fat, Fred.
Even on a first watch, Dark Phoenix is a chore to get through. It's crazy that this was the second attempt at adapting the eponymous comic book storyline. X-Men The Last Stand muscles the Cure storyline in, and they fight for screen time, but at a lean 90 minutes, it's easily the better movie.
Oh, you get the point!
Dark Phoenix doesn't have the character work of the previous films, it doesn't have the goofy charm, it doesn't even have any good action. Well, aside from one scene, one marvellous freaking scene that feels like it was inserted from a different movie altogether. Dark Phoenix's finale had to be changed at the last minute because of its supposed similarities to Captain Marvel, and so the stunt team were given Cate Blanchett with a budget to do whatever they wanted in a train set action sequence. And oh my god, this scene is fire! Where the rest of the movie threatens to put you in a coma, this scene slaps you awake. It goes from the worst X-Men movie to one of the best X-Men live action scenes of all time. It is a splendid action showcase that highlights all the key mutants' abilities and combat specialities, with intimidating villains set to a fantastic score. I'd rather you stuck this single scene on a loop for 2 hours than make me watch the rest of the movie again. This is without doubt the best scene in Fox's final X-Men outing. The best, or should I say only good, scene in X-Men Dark Phoenix. The dark side is a pathway to many abilities some consider to be unnatural. But some abilities are just plain useful to learn. And with that, I want to talk about today's sponsor, LingoPie, a language learning app that allows you to grasp languages for your favourite movies and shows. Regurgitating phrases and translations are useful for learning a language, but getting to grips with the conversational side of things is paramount. With LingoPie, you can translate a plethora of Netflix movies and shows and learn whilst you watch. A good notable work to test it out would be multi-award winning drama Roma, as I did. LingoPie is the world's first learning language platform that uses these shows to teach you languages with interactive subtitles and quizzes. Languages including Spanish, Italian, Korean, Japanese, and so much more, with thousands of hours of content within different genres and new content added every single week. They've won up themselves by also selecting Netflix shows. There are tons of unique features like fun and engaging vocabulary quizzes, dual subtitles, and really handy interactive subtitles. These words get automatically added to flashcards, which you can use to review later. If you like learning languages, I think you'll really enjoy this, so why not give LingoPie a try and take your language learning to the next level? It's fun, easy, and effective. And who knows, you might just discover your new favourite foreign film. So if any of you are interested in learning a new language in a unique and honestly fun way, I suggest checking out LingoPie. If you click the link in my description below, you will get a free 7-day trial plus 55% off. Ow! That was an absolutely seamless ad transition. There's no way you'd be able to tell that I was going to put that ad on last week's Star Wars video. No way whatsoever. Unlimited power! What really strikes me as different about this action scene is the inventive use of powers in conjunction with physical moves and hand-to-hand combat, and the evenly weighted use of every character. The previous movies usually rely on the big hitters like Wolverine or Magneto for the action, relegating the other team members to smaller action moments. It's rare you have a scene like the White House attack in X2, an action scene purely focused on someone other than the metal-themed mutants.
Get away from her, you bitch!
Another thing about this sequence is that it suddenly makes the bad guys cool, even if just for a moment. Jessica Chastain's alien manipulator, I think her name's Vuk, or I don't know, who the fuck cares, am I right? Is one of the worst X-Men baddies, if not the worst, and her alien henchmen who are definitely not Skrulls are boring and one note. However, in this scene we really get to see their strengths. With their cold stares, relentless attitude, and shape-shifting abilities, they really remind me of the T-1000, which is always obviously going to be a very favourable comparison. A bunch of T-1000s charging into battle against the X-Men with all their respective mutant powers is pretty cool, to be honest. We only ever see the X-Men poning human beings with guns or fighting other mutants, so it's cool to see them fight some aliens. And these aliens aren't just cookie-cutter Chitauri, they're actually pretty formidable. They feel like a real challenge to even X-Men as powerful as Storm or Magneto. I love how inhuman they move, their mute expressions and apparent lack of aversion to pain. They bound towards the X-Men soldiers in the scene, and it works. I love this guy who leaps towards the helicopter with the mounted gun.
Get out.
Also, because these dudes are aliens, it means you can really lay into them. They get shredded, crushed, torn up, all kinds of nasty crap. It's that Genndy Tartakovsky thing of being able to pull off more violence in a PG-13 family space because you're not showing humans or human blood. This is one of the most brutal X-Men fight scenes outside of the R-rated Deadpool or Logan films. Nightcrawler's first live-action scene still holds up to this day and puts a whole bunch of modern Marvel action to shame. For some reason, Nightcrawler was never utilised like that ever again, even when the role was recast and the character was brought back into the fold. Well, this scene doesn't top the Nightcrawler action in X-Men 2, but it at least attempts to give him some cool action, the kind almost entirely absent in all of his other appearances. After failing to save an MCU soldier, no really, an MCU soldier, Kurt goes full beast mode and picks up shrapnel, using them as knives in conjunction with his tail. He teleports into battle and quickly dispatches several of the aliens, even breaking a neck with his tail in a particularly gnarly moment. I'm still waiting for a scene that depicts Kurt Wagner's sword mastery, like the cutscene in the very first Marvel Ultimate Alliance. Even so, it's nice that this version of the character got to use some stabbing implements, and I can only assume this would have been taken even further in a follow-up. To top it off, Nightcrawler uses his teleportation for an inventive kill, zipping an unfortunate alien away from the action and directly into the path of the train itself. Look at that grin, he knows this was cold as hell. Nightcrawler even takes a shot at Big Boss Chastain, pulling a dead soldier's knife and unleashing a teleporting flurry, hitting the alien queen from all angles. He fails, of course, much like the other X-Men. Cyclops is all too often too much of a bitch in these movies. Remember that time Lady Deathstrike whooped his ass? And he spent the rest of the movie under Stryker's spell, a move so, great, that they ripped it off wholesale with Hawkeye and the Avengers. If you're unsure how best to depict a hero's powers, just take them off the board entirely, yay! I get that his powers are far less versatile than some of the other X-Men, which is why it makes sense to show off the power of his optic beams in full force.
Ah! Fuck! No! Fuck! Stop doing full force!
The most satisfying moment is when Cyclops beams a guy running full pelt towards him. After establishing how many bullets would be needed to take down one of these aliens, it really shows off the effectiveness of his optic blasts. The aliens fly off the train and into the night.
Okay.
Storm gets this awesome top-down spinning shot as she levitates above the whole train and then fries like 10 of them at once. Storm's lightning is really effectively used, but I like that they didn't forget that she has a bunch of other weather-based powers. With one gush of wind, she sends a group of these bad guys hurtling into another carriage, allowing Mags to Well, we'll get to that awesomeness in a minute. Storm has such an awesome and versatile set of moves. She's got a great backstory. I know she hasn't been sidelined as much as other mutants, but I've never understood why she hasn't been driving any of these stories more. If I was doing an MCU X-Men movie, she would be top of my list as the central protagonist. Beast's acrobatics have always been given a decent go ever since the character's first appearance in Last Stand, but this is the best his powers have ever been depicted. Nick Holt's Beast flipping over the camera and slamming bad guys into walls with powerful leg kicks is a joy to watch. Hank McCoy feels fast, strong and agile, a real physical force of nature in contrast to the other characters and their powers. He has the least visually interesting powers of anybody in this scene, so the camera work is paramount to making his action exciting. Luckily, Beast is always framed up really well. Even when he's zipping about and doing flips, there's an appropriate level of clarity to the action. The only really lame moment from Beast is when Jessica Chastain punks him. One hit for Hank McCoy? Come on. Even the hair guy gets a couple of decent swings in.
Even the guy who can't think says something, you guys just stand there?
Why do most of Magneto's henchmen in these movies always have the lamest mutant powers? You always get the X-Men standing there, each with a cool power, sometimes two cool powers, and then you always get Magneto leading an assortment of the worst powers imaginable. I mean, this guy just has a really lethal ponytail. It's so lame. Everyone gets their moment, but it's still Magneto who takes the cake. Can you really blame the movie for having the best action via Magneto? He's one of the all-time comic book GOATs for a reason. Personally, I never get tired of Eric using his metal manipulation in creative and destructive ways, and that is no more true here. The camera moving around Magneto as he slips their attacks is great. I especially love when he pushes himself back, upwards, by pushing away from the metal flooring. It's a really neat use of his powers. We rarely see Magneto get this physical, and it's a great little sizzle to show off what this character's action is truly capable of. After seeing him use these handcuffs as close quarters weapons, I need to see more of him doing this. Look at this! I swear to you this is in the movie called X-Men Dark Phoenix. I love that after fighting them up close and personal, he just decides screw it. With Storm pushing these arseholes into the next carriage, it all but seals their fate. Seals being the pertinent word, as Mags collapses the whole thing and crushes it as easily as a tin can. Watching the aliens scramble to get out as it implodes like an imploding thing. I can't think of a single famous implosion being talked about. Just imagine it. Magneto is easily one of the coolest gun-wielding superheroes, not least for the simple fact that he never carries one. He just yanks whichever weapon he wants, when he wants, and then tosses them aside when he has no use for them. He's done this many times in the film series, but Dark Phoenix is one of the most memorable instances of that, because instead of threatening a group of people, Mags pulls together enough weaponry for a small army, purely for one final boss.
I want every gun we have to fire on that man.
Eric telekinetically pulls every gun he can see and surrounds Jessica Chastain before blasting her relentlessly as she just casually walks towards him in a Terminator-esque fashion. Awesome. And then Jean is the crescendo to this scene. She tumbles the entire train and tears it apart, and it's a pretty cool way to end the scene, I'm not going to lie. I like that everything is getting torn apart around the X-Men, but Jean has attained such mastery over her powers that not a single bit is hitting any of them. They're in the middle of the destruction, but they're still safe. It's pretty cool. The only true misfire to this scene is, well, A, that they don't have any comic book costumes on. Imagine this whole scene, but they're in comic book costumes. The one misfire, aside from that, is that they didn't use Quicksilver. I would have loved to have seen him used in a combat scenario as a speedster. He could have zipped around smacking these dudes. Instead, it feels like he was absent for most of the movie because they didn't know what to do with him. That, or maybe Peter's had some scheduling conflicts. I don't know.
Hey, slow down. Safety first.
I love John Ottman's work with the X-Men series. There's a bunch of really moving tracks through all the films he's contributed to, and that main theme is honestly awesome. is easily the most underrated superhero theme, and it upsets me to no end that it was banished in Multiverse of Madness. The animated theme is great, but we're already getting a revival of that, so Deadpool 3 better deliver the Ottman goods.
Not touching that.
Anyway, in spite of his absence for Dark Phoenix, we get one of the composing goats in Hans freaking Zimmer. Yes, Hans Zimmer did the score for this movie. I didn't know that either. The track Gap plays throughout the course of this scene, and honestly, it is fire. You got one of the best composers on X-Men, he delivers one of the best tracks in the franchise, and he puts it in this crappy movie. Why? But hey, at least it gets utilised in the movie's best scene, that's something. Zimmer's Gap seriously elevates this sequence, the rhythm adding some real energy to the action. The track bears a striking resemblance to Johann Brahms' German Requiem second movement. Hans Zimmer has famously composed some incredible tracks for Batman, Make That Batman, but his work in Dark Phoenix is definitely worthy of a mention too. What you're left with is a gloriously entertaining scene, including all your favourite X-Men apart from Wolverine, kicking ass against some genuinely tough baddies. All that neat choreography and effects work is bolstered by this awesome Zimmer score, meaning just about everything in this scene is firing on all cylinders. This was the end of the Fox X-Men, and oh what a whimper this was. The movie was the biggest bomb of 2019, released not too long after Avengers Endgame, but unable to escape the massive superhero box office shadow it cast. I don't think anybody was hyped, and the movie turned out to be an utterly inessential chapter to the Fox-Men story. It would have been better to end the X-Men prequels as a trilogy of Apocalypse, before it really went off the rails here. Still, I'm glad that we got this one awesome action scene, I'm glad we got this Zimmer score, and I'm glad I got to see that in the cinema, in spite of everything else around it. I really was astonished to see any of the Fox era in the MCU, and even though Evan Peters ended up playing Ralph Boner...
Ralph Boner?
It was truly surprising to see his face in WandaVision at all. After that, we got a heavy hitter in the form of Patty Stew's Xavier in Multiverse of Madness. I recall in my X-Men video on the subject that once you bring him back, you open the floodgates, and now Deadpool 3 has done the unthinkable and brought back Hugh Jackman's Wolverine. Deadpool's third installment is bringing back all of his supporting characters too. We're getting a true Fox-Men movie within the MCU, and that is crazy. Rumours are abound that the original X-Men, including Halle Berry, James Marsden and Famke Jensen, are returning. I have such an affinity for the X-Men film series that I really would love them to return, and hopefully Deadpool 3 tees up this version of the X-Men for Secret Wars. Give them a loving send-off in Secret Wars and D3 instead of the meagre ending they got in Dark Phoenix. Of course, anyone with any taste would be able to vouch for the idea that James McAvoy and Michael Fassbender are still perfect as younger versions of Xavier and Magneto. If the X-Men use their faces as variants to kick off a new continuity, then I say, why the hell not? They would be the two variants I'd love to see spearhead a new era for the X-Men. The prequel X-Men weren't badly cast, but they never got to be in good X-Men movies. McAvoy and Fassbender got to be in First Class and Days of Future Past, and so their cultural cachet is much stronger. Time will tell to see what the MCU makes of this universe. Contrary to what some say, there was a lot of good work in these movies, and I don't think everything from them should be banished going forward. However, if this movie is the end for McAvoy and Fassbender in these roles, then at least they got to be part of one truly stellar scene to cap things off. A big thank you to my full fat tier patron, Dr. Chike, and Nathan Shaw. If you'd like to donate money to my Patreon, you can find me at patreon.com/fullfatvideos. If you'd like to find me on Instagram, you can find me at full_fat_videos. And if you'd like to find me on Twitter, you can find me at fullfatvideos.